Thanks for joining. Um, we're recording this session, so I'm going to run through quite a bit of material. You will be able to get the recording. I put on this session because I see a lot of people who are a bit confused about how they can use AI, what it can do. And I just really wanted to share with you that if you can use Outlook, you can use AI. The tools are much simpler than some of the tools we're used to. And so it is really worth just getting your head around what they're good for and how you can implement them in your practice. Sometimes if you feel that picture, you're in an old bus and it's rusted, wheezing, barely holding it together. There's a crunch every time you change gears. There's bundles and boxes strapped all around. You can't even remember what's in them. And it's hot, you're tense, you're really gripping the steering wheel really tight as you lurch around potholes, and you just hope the whole thing makes it to the next stop. And that's what it can feel like when you're running a law firm with manual processes and without the right tools in place. Virginia, would you mind just putting yourself on mute? Thanks. It can feel like it's just, you'll get there, but it's exhausting. Time's short, goods people are hard to find and harder to keep. And now clients are forwarding you their advice, your advice they've put into ChatGPT and asking you to check whether the summary that the AI has made is correct. It just feels like AI is just another thing that you have to navigate. But what if you had modern systems that were integrated and that were just humming along in the background, pulling through the data you needed from smooth intake, delivery under predefined parameters? If you could spend your time finessing documents and paying attention to the big strategic picture rather than looking for that piece of information that feels like looking for a needle in a haystack. Your whole team knows what lies ahead, and you've got some space to breathe and to focus on the experience. And it's not just about moving faster, it's working smarter with less friction and more freedom. And that's where the promise of AI tools are. Not by turning you into a tech expert, not by taking away the work that you and the knowledge and experience and the skills that you've honed over years, but by giving you better tools to let you focus on the work that only you can do. So, over the past couple of years, I've helped now over 120 different law firms and in house teams unlock more value from the tech tools that they already have and identify what's missing from their setup. I started out as a litigation lawyer in a big law firm. I moved to mid tier and then to a small law firm, and I worked back in house. And I became sort of interested in technology really by accident. I've never been into coding or video gaming, but when I was in that small firm in a small team, I just saw how useful tech could be to really level the playing field when you were up against better resourced opponents. So I went back and I studied innovation and change management. I talked to a whole lot of law firm owners who were experimenting with running new law firms and doing things like value pricing and digital first tech service. And I just kept on seeing the same pattern wherever I was moving around in house, in mid tier, back in big law. I was moved through all of those. And the busy lawyers just didn't have the time to find or to make use of even the tools they already had available that could help them. And that common frustration really led me to write my book, Tech Enabled Lawyer. And it was the book that I wish that somebody had given me when I was trying to work all this out. So now I teach about legal technology and I help firms implement AIs into ways that actually work. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of noise. I want to just try to cut through some of the things that I think it's important to know. And why am I doing this? And why am I running a free webinar about this? I just see really clever lawyers burning themselves out, working with these old dated systems, and I really want to help. I just want to share what I've worked out that works so that you don't waste time repeating avoidable mistakes. I'm going to share four common mistakes that I think that law firm owners make and suggest some things that you could do instead to be successful. Just starting with where are we at with AI? These are just some statistics. There are lots of surveys that all the tech vendors are putting out, but this sort of shape is pretty common. We've just seen this huge uptake in realization or acceptance that AI tools can be used. So we've got 53% of small firms and solo practitioners integrating AI into their workflows, according to Smokeball. Similar sort of consistently, somewhere around 70 to 80% of practitioners saying that they think it can be useful for their work. We're also just seeing a broader change of attitude around AI for the past year. And yes, when AI first came out 2 years ago, there was sort of a lot of excitement. People tried it. A lot of people were like, I've tried this and I can't see how it's useful. I want to just talk through a bit deeper. And if you've had that experience, I just want to encourage you to be a bit more curious because what we're seeing here, big jump in the numbers of lawyers who are consistently using it. We're seeing clients are expecting their lawyers to use it. We're seeing a big jump in the number of professional service. So that's broader than just legal. But a big jump in the number of professional services firms that are making that part of their plans. And we're also seeing that consistent number, this one was 40% of professionals having used publicly available ChatGPT for work purposes. And that in itself is scary because there are a lot of reasons why the publicly available AIs are not suitable for legal work. You may want to use them for sort of marketing or stuff where you're not using client confidential information. But if you're running a team and you're making an assumption that people aren't using the publicly available AI tools because you've told them not to, that assumption may need to be challenged because we're just seeing a lot of growth of under the covers use of AI, and that is getting people in trouble. So my one takeaway to you is if you haven't played around with what those publicly available tools can do, try them for yourself on something you know well. Ask it a whole lot of questions about, it doesn't have to be legal, but if your personal hobby is archery, go and ask it about the rules of archery or something that you know really well, and just get yourself familiar what these tools are capable of, because you need to be able to recognize when somebody is using it and putting that in front of you, or when the other side is using it, or when your clients are using it. So why is everybody adopting these tools? This is a blind assessment of four different legally trained AI tools. So it was Harvey, Co-Counsel, Vincent, and another tool called Oliver. And what they did was they took a couple of legal tasks and they got a bunch of human lawyers that were selected as a benchmarking exercise, and they gave them the same tools to that bunch of humans and to the AI. And the AI tools outperformed the humans on four of those tasks. So document analysis, extracting key information from a long document, and transcript summaries. Matched it on chronologies and weren't as good as humans on redlining and searching the company's database. Not only that did the AI tools do better than the humans, they were somewhere between 6 and 80 times faster. And you just have to think, a lot of the times you might give an AI to a job to do and say, oh, it's not as good as what I would do. But if it's 80 times faster, you just do have to think about, all right, maybe it's not as good as me now, but how long can I keep on doing this manually if something can get me a good enough result 80 times faster? So I said I'd share the four mistakes that I see people making when it comes to AI. So firstly is thinking, oh, look, I can see that AI will be useful for insert other kind of lawyer here. Maybe it's personal injury lawyers that have a lot of volume, but I only do corporate work with a small number of clients. And I spoke to a litigator who had just gone out on his own. He was hitting that point where, maybe I need to expand my firm. I've got too much work. I said, have you looked at AI chronology? And oh, no, I need to really understand the nuance of my clients' matters. And so anyway, to his credit, he came, he had a look with me, and we put in a brand new matter that he needed to get across. And it turned around a timeline. It took all of that bunch of random corporate documents, some meetings, some a company statement, a long narrative email. It turned that into a really neat, structured timeline in a matter of minutes. And I could just see from his face, just, oh, I see. I have to reassess. I've been dismissing this without really understanding what it was capable of. No, it would not replace, he would still need to go and understand those documents. But in terms of just being able to have a starting point and have a springboard on something like chronologies that can take days, he needed to factor that into his assessment of how he was running his business. So the second mistake is equating access with adoption. So I worked with a company that had decided, the CEO was mad keen on AI. He thought it was going to be huge. He'd started up his own firm and with using cloud technology, and he thought this was going to be even bigger. He was very keen. They rolled out access to everyone. And a couple of months later, there'd been a little spike when everybody got their first access, and then it had absolutely flatlined. And just giving people access to these tools does not mean that they will use them, and does not mean that they will find the way to get value out of them. There is a there is a skill uplift that's involved here, and you also need to create an environment where people are encouraged to explore different ways of working and have the time to do that exercise. Because if somebody is already working at 110 or 120% capacity, the only thing that makes for them sense for them is to keep on going the way they know works. For them to stop and re-engineer their process is going to take some time. And if you want to get the benefit of these tools, unfortunately, the hard truth is you're going to have to slow down a little bit in order to be able to go faster down the track. So the next mistake I'm seeing is people not looking past generic AI tools. And when I say, we'll go into this a bit more, but when I say generic AI tools, I'm thinking about something like ChatGPT, Gemini, um, even Microsoft Copilot. So they're general enterprise AI tools, and they're very good at summarizing and finding information and producing draft materials, but they don't have any particular legal expertise. And what I'm seeing in the head-to-head testing I've seen is that the quality of the output of the legal tools against those generic tools on legal tasks is streets above. So if I had one client who wanted to copy and paste whole lots of information out of witness interviews and put them into a format that they could use for their final work product. And we were going to just use Copilot to do that because it was going to be, a fixed cost, and it was sort of easier to set up. But when we did some experimentation, we found out that working with an AI engineer to build a bespoke solution didn't cost very much and got a much better result that was much more nuanced to be useful for them. So if you've been experimenting with those generic tools, well done, that's fantastic. But also just think about, could you get a much better return from investing in a more, a sharper tool? And finally, fourth mistake is just focusing on the cost and just saying, "Oh, AI is too expensive." And I hear this all the time, and small firms are telling me that they can't afford AI that the big firms are using, and big firms are saying they can't afford the AI because they have to roll it out to everyone, and it's going to be a big cost. I really do think that we just have to be looking at, what does this make possible and what value does this create? And we're going to look a bit further on at what our clients' expectations are going to be. And I do think that you have to factor that in, the cost of doing nothing. It's pretty easy to say, oh, well, it's going to cost me X thousand dollars to experiment with these tools. But it's always harder to say, what is it going to cost me if I don't keep up with what's happening? And we're not just competing against other law firms, but we're competing with where a client's going to go to get the services they're provided from us. I don't think that AIs are going to replace lawyers, but I do think that we need to just be thinking about where the value we have, and that value can lie in, it's always been in navigating complexity, being a wise counsel and being a reassuring and a guide through really turbulent and complicated problems. And that piece will remain. But what if you can do that assisted by AI that can go through the 40 versions of the document and answer the question about what's the liability cap on this document instantly, rather than you having to say, oh, I can't answer that right now, I'll look it up and come back to you. So just looking for those moments where you can have that AI to accelerate, amplify your impact rather than replace you. So I'm going to run through some use cases. I just want to start, for anybody who is a bit unsure about what I'm talking about with generative AI. Basically, underneath the generative AI tools is a large language model, which makes predictions of what is the likely next word. And so when you ask generative AI a question, it runs over all of the material that it's been trained on, and basically they've read the internet, and they say, based on a statistical model of the most likely next word, it's this. And so they come up with a new response to your question that's based on all the material that's already existing and put together based on that statistical model. And so it's just important to remember that it doesn't have any view about the truth of what it's saying, and it doesn't have any belief. However, it seems very coherent and very confident. And so that's where people can fall into mistake, because the answers that are presented look like they're correct, look like they're well thought through. And so you just always have to keep in your mind that this is something that needs to be checked carefully. When I'm talking about generative AI options, I think about them in three buckets. So there's the general tools, so ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity, and also AI inside business, enterprise, productivity tools. Then there's tools that have been designed specifically for legal. And then there's the bucket of tools that you can build yourself, so that you're taking advantage of AI, but you're training it on your own data or data within your organization and your own specific workflows and preferred ways of working. So we're going to look at these in a bit more detail, but I just wanted to set the scene of that's what I'm talking about. In that middle bucket where we're talking about legal AI tools, I'm including generative AI that comes inside practice management systems. And so we're seeing a few of those emerge. For instance, the Archie inside Smokeball, it will read the documents inside your matter and it will extract information about a particular contract, for instance, or it will help you draft an email to respond to a client inquiry based on information in that matter. It won't do legal research. So you just need to understand which tool will help you for when. I am not suggesting that you should just buy one AI. And in fact, I'm suggesting the opposite. I'm suggesting that you may need several AIs to get the good benefits because you may want to have some AI that helps you manage your inbox. You may want to have an AI that helps you keep your matters ticking over. And you may want to have an AI that runs some billing reporting in a workflow. So I hear a lot of people asking, which AI should I buy? And yes, you should start somewhere, but there's not, and also all these tools are changing and constantly moving around. So you should definitely be looking for what what combination of tools will best help me and solve the problems that I'm facing in my business that will unlock the most value. So this is just trying to help people think through when you get to that, oh, I tried the AI and the answer was terrible, and so I put it away and never used it again. Here are some things that you might want to try. Uh, Quite good at long email chains. If you get, I mean, every now and again we have those clients who send about 8 emails a day and there's lots of long irrelevant worrying that's going on in there. AI is pretty good at filtering through that and coming back with a really nice, kind response that answers their questions that you had already answered, but answers them again, uh, and just saves some of that mental load from you of having to wade through all of those long emails. Really good at finding. I once had a note that I had to send something to David, and I'd made that note on Monday. By the time it got to Friday, I couldn't remember which David it was. So I asked Copilot, and it was able to go back and work out which David I'd promised something to. And creating visually interesting presentations. Really good at coming up with some images and giving in PowerPoint the designer feature can help just improve the look of your presentation. So that some legal tools, extracting information from lots of documents. So if you're reviewing a whole lot of leases and you want to have a nice organized table of, the start and end dates, the review dates, whether there's a change of control provision, it can extract all of that for you. You will still need to go back and check that, but it's just jump starting. You can also get it to summarize a new judgment, and then you can ask it to extract the key implications for a particular kind of client. And then you can ask it to tailor that to a particular client's requirements. If you know your clients only ever read the first line, you can just help it to tailor your communications. If you have done a whole lot of amendments to a contract, you can ask AI to summarize those amendments in bullet points and send the covering email first to the client or to the business. This is what I think we need to change. And then an email to the other side. And this is what's been changed. So that after you've done all the work of marking it up, you're not then going back and spending another 20, half an hour summarizing all of that. And then just asking questions. Where is this matter up to? Did I send my template letter about X to this client? Can you just look through for me? So it's a bit of an assistant. You can ask questions about maybe you've got a really long strata report. Can we keep pets in this apartment? And you can also just get some help to maybe you've got a court timetable, just turn that into a set of dates and activities that have to happen that you can then plug into your diary. You can, if you're working in a team, people really are liking being able to get a transcription of meetings and have that generate some action items. Again, you'll always check, but it's a really good way of just what are we all agreed to do here. If you've missed half of a meeting, you can catch the recap and catch yourself up on what's happened. Can You can set up a collection of, maybe you've got a whole lot of advices you've written on a particular topic. Maybe you're in an in-house team and you've received a whole lot of advices on how you might apply some sort of, there's a new data privacy requirement. You can have a little collection and people can query that collection and get answers from the advice that has already been created. And you're locking that down so you're not drawing in random answers from the internet. You're asking trusted content. So legal use cases, preparing a chronology is a great one. Uh, the chronologies are not perfect. The chronology that an AI produces is not as good as the one that you would do yourself. However, in a matter of 10, 15 minutes, you will have hundreds of pages of documents summarized in chronological order, and you can then go and edit that chronology in a couple of hours so that instead of taking days, you have a result you're happy with in a much shorter period of time. You can, if the other side has served you with some submissions, you can now go through and check um, how have those cases been the subject of any adverse treatment? Are there any cases that have overturned those principles that are being relied upon? And you can ask AI to help you come up with a summary of the cases that are relied on. You will still read the cases, but you can just get that snapshot, a bit like having a head note, just to understand what's this case about before you go and do your detailed reading. You can ask questions like, pull out the unfair provisions in this agreement based on what we know is unfair from the consumer law. You can ask to compare two different versions of events from different witness statements or from a complaint letter and from incident reports, and just try to see where there are factual similarities and differences. And then Matter AI. I was a bit surprised by this one, but Smokeball tells me that everybody is always asking, where's this matter up to? So I guess just that question where you're feeling a bit out of control, getting AI to bring you up to speed. Um, Also, if you've put together a submission or you've put together maybe a negotiating position, what's the other side going to say to this? Tell me, where are the weaknesses? What have I not considered? What, how else could I express this in order to make it more persuasive to the other side? And, maybe go through a contract and pull out the renewal dates or the option dates so that you can make sure you've diarised those for your client. Again, with all of this, you're going to check what they pull out, but these are just some ideas. In larger teams, yes, generating a first draft when you just can't stand looking at that white page anymore. Uh, I've been using it to help me to delegate tasks. So when I want to make sure that I've given enough context for somebody to understand what my expectation is, there are going to be, you can help it to turn things into a process so that the next series of tasks that have to happen in a standard process can be easier to automate. Uh, Another one is, if you're trying to pitch for work, you can suggest different pricing tiers. What will I include in, if I was to give you a gold level price as opposed to a silver or a bronze level? What are some things that I could include that don't require me to do one-on-one time, but maybe I can make available some material that will be useful to the client and I can charge a different price for that. So comparing documents against a checklist or against a house policy, preparing for an interview. It did. if you have got to update a whole lot of documents because the law has changed or there's been a policy change, you can use the AI to check across a whole set of documents, find the non-compliant provisions, and scope out what's going to be involved in updating that. And then with Matter AI, so getting some help just to um, get narratives for time entries, looking for trends in data sets like bank statements or other collections of data, and helping you to work out how can we standardize material. At the core of all of this is having a standard process is going to really enable you to maximize the value from these tools. So you may want to just be thinking about how can we change the way that we work in order to get ready for the way that these tools are evolving and how the way they're improving over time. And there is likely to be quite a lot of work involved in that. As long as I've been around law firms, no one's ever been able to agree on, what's the best way to, you do a term of settlement deed, things like that. You can have lots of strongly held views about these things. So don't underestimate some of that work if you are trying to look at standardized processing across a large team. So this is just some examples of the sort of things that you might want to be using a generative AI assistant for in a legal office. Translation, you can use it to help you study things. You can transcribe phone calls and meetings. Um, we've covered quite a few of that, so I'll keep moving. Then this is what you might be using legally trained documents for. So you might be looking at, reviewing contracts, extracting information out of particular documents to answer things on a matter, generating documents, doing legal research, again, translating, um, comparing documents is a common one, and chronologies. Um, I just need to give a disclaimer that these tools is by no means a comprehensive list, and probably since I prepared this slide, there've been a whole host of new functionality that's come out. But I'd just like to give you some names so that you've got some place to start. You should definitely make your own inquiries about this, and you should check whether a tool is the best tool for you, and we'll cover that in a later slide. But I just want to paint the picture of what tools are around, and so that you're not just thinking that the only options are ChatGPT or, what you might have been exposed to. There are lots of options. When it comes to, you know, AI into workflow, there are heaps and heaps, there's hundreds. If I gave you the whole list of all the hundreds, that would not be useful. So I'm sorry to anybody who's got a tool that isn't on there. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that I've had to stop somewhere. Um, so the third bucket are those custom AI tools. So this is looking at how can we put together a whole series of activities and join them together. And if you have been finding, oh, I don't really see how the AI is going to help me, this is going to drastically improve and get much cheaper. And I think that in a couple of years, we'll just all be running these little digital AI assistants and little agentic workflows in a way that we haven't really contemplated before. The way that standard workflows in maybe your practice management system were always a bit clunky, and you would put in all the steps. I was in litigation, you'd put in all the steps for the matter, and then the matter would go to mediation, and all of the redundant steps would still be there. The agentic is going to be much more flexible. So you're going to be able to have much smarter assistance. And I'm kind of excited about just where this is going to go. If you want to start with these tools, have a look at Microsoft 365, have a look at the ability of SharePoint agents, and Copilot Studio. You do need to change your licensing, but it's a relatively small lift if you want to explore how you can use these tools. The sort of thing you might want to be using it for is here's a collection of documents that we have about this area that we're experts in, and I'm just going to have a when people can't get hold of me because I'm in back-to-back meetings, they can ask this little collection of everything I know about the treatment of GST on property located, I don't know, in some location. But you can just create quite um, targeted collections that can be a useful place for people to get information without having to always come through you. So managing risk. You, I'm putting this in here because obviously everybody's worried about, well, what about confidentiality? What about breach of copyright? What about if the AI gets things wrong? What about hallucinations? And these are all very good questions and very valid risks. I do also just want to remind you that as lawyers, we often have a framework where we focus overly on the negative and we can miss the the positives. And so by all means, I think my suggestion is get help to navigate the risks, make sure that the security is proper. Get if you're not comfortable in assessing which is the right tools and get some help. There is lots of help available, but don't not use these tools because you don't really understand and you're a bit scared about it. Because we saw that statistic before 40% of people, and that could include 40% of people in your firm, are using the publicly available tools for legal work, which is not good. You need to have a policy in place. You need to be able to pick that up. So you can't just ignore this because you're frightened of getting it wrong. Doing nothing is already getting it wrong. This was just a recent decision where it wasn't really a problem of the AI hallucinating so much as a junior person had prepared footnotes to an application, giving citations to a whole series of anthropological reports in a native title matter and had used Google Scholar to generate those citations instead of going into the office and looking at the actual documents to get the. So it's kind of one of those examples of shortcuts. These tools are tempting. And so we do just need to stay mindful that as legal practitioners, when we're dealing as officers of the court, that we have checked the material and the courts are finding this is an increasing problem. I think that the count of lawyers globally that have been found to have handed up hallucinated case names is about 300 instances now just in the media. Probably there's more examples of that. I don't think that means you should not use AI to help you with your legal research. I think that, and mind you, you do have to be mindful if you're in New South Wales of the Supreme Court practice note and comply with that. But I think what it really means is that these tools are so um, helpful, and if you have people who are busy and are in a hurry, they're very seductive, and so you do need to just make sure that you are really mindful about the way that these tools are used and that you're giving people the right understanding of what these tools can and can't be used for. There are tools that can check and pick up hallucinated citations, so you can look for those. And you just need to have that on your radar that this is something that you're going to need to be double checking. I'm suggesting people that if you are trying to do some drafting of documents, that you may want to just do your thinking and get out your first draft first, and then use AI to refine your drafting, make it more concise, improve the structure. I think that sometimes it's very tempting to use AI to come up with a presentation or a submission or maybe a business case. What you will find is that it'll tend to be quite um, high level, and it just may not have the right depth of thinking that you need for a really high quality product. But experiment with it. By all means, this is why I keep on saying you just have to try these out and see. Um, there are going to be some tasks where AI is not the best solution at the moment. So if you need to generate a contract and have it be exactly the same, and you need it to comply with the approved template that has been developed over years, you do not want to be asking generative AI to produce a contract for sale of land from scratch when you could plug in a few variables and get an approved document that you don't have to check as carefully within, a couple of minutes. So just really, what's the right tool to be using here? It can do it will produce tools that don't need as much proofreading, but it may there is good proofreading tools that are available that are dedicated to that purpose. And so, yeah, just really be mindful that AI is not a magic button. And just because it can make things faster doesn't necessarily mean that that's a job that needs to be done or that needs to be done with the assistance of AI. One of the things that there's been a lot of noise about is training people on how to do prompts. And yes, that is important. You do, one of the problems about AI adoption is just giving these tools to people and then finding that they're not really sure how to use them. So, yes, giving them some knowledge about the way these tools work and how to prompt them to get a good result. I think that the importance of prompt engineering is going to sort of fade away over time as the tools are getting better and AI is getting incorporated more deeply into the new ways of working. What we're also finding is that giving people specific use cases is really useful. So, and this keeps coming up over and over again in research, that when you equip somebody, sort of like what we've done here today, use it to do X task, use it to make a chronology. Then when people are doing it, and next time a chronology comes, oh, maybe I'll use the AI to do that, as opposed to it just getting on with and doing things in a default fashion. So just think about how can we equip people to be able to make the most of these tools. If you are looking for some assistance, if you're feeling that you really just don't know enough about this, the Centre for Legal Innovation prepared a great lot of practical information, and they have a legal prompt engineering guide that you can download. The UK Law Society has also put out a really good primer that goes through and defines all of the things that I've skimmed over today. So if you do want just to understand it, go through that. You can also ask ChatGPT for some help. It's really good at teaching you about new things. So um, there is lots of help. There are lots of courses available, um, but it is something that is really worthwhile leaning into a bit more. I just wanted to talk a bit about client expectations. Um, and this is just one survey point where Clio did a survey of people in the US about what they thought what clients thought that lawyers should be using AI for. And you can see that across the range, uh, clients were very comfortable with lawyers using AI. We're also seeing that within a lot of interest in in-house corporate teams buying these AI tools so that they can use them, and that may reduce the amount of work that they put out to external firms. Uh, Thomson Reuters did another data survey this year that said that 57% of clients wanted their law firms to use AI. I mean, in all of these surveys, there you'll find some clients who are saying no, you cannot use AI. So it's all very much horses for courses. But I think that we are entering into a world now where you need to be able to meaningfully discuss with your clients whether or not AI is good for what their needs, whether it aligns with their risk tolerance, whether it aligns with their requirements for data storage and data processing. If they have requirements for all of any processing of their data to be conducted on Australia soil, that will reduce which tools that you're able to use, because you'll have to make sure that you are using a tool where all of the data is retained here and processed here. So what are we seeing? So we're seeing not just corporate in-house clients, but that the story I mentioned at the beginning about individual private clients putting things into ChatGPT and running their legal advice through ChatGPT. There was a UK survey that said that people were more comfortable accepting advice from an AI lawyer than a human lawyer. And one of the things about the AI tools, if you've played around with them, you'll know that they're endlessly supportive, endlessly encouraging. They're never in a bad mood. They always think you're terrific. And try as we might, we're human, and every now and again we may be slow or a little bit cranky. So it's kind of in some ways, it may be an unrealistic expectation that we will always be as easy to deal with as an AI. However, there are things that we can do and we can see about the way that a matter is likely to go. About we know we can spot risks. We can help navigate these really wicked and complex problems in a way that an AI tool can't. So we need to get better at explaining our value and explaining why you shouldn't just get an AI generated contract and why you should come to a lawyer and go through a legal process. We have to just be able to verbalize that in a way that we haven't had to before. But and I think that's the other reason why I'm encouraging people to engage with these tools, just to see what the output is and how it is satisfying and how it feels like you've got a good answer up front. There are opportunities for lawyers to broaden out the services that they're offering. You can help your clients to navigate this process. Where can they safely use AI? How can they incorporate that in process improvement? You might need to think about broadening your team so that you are including things like data scientists, including education. We've got a massive job here to upskill the profession on how to use these tools safely and effectively. We can keep on seeing comments about AI putting pressure on hourly billing models, and the head of Minters was quoted on the Financial Review as saying that this is the end of the billable hour. Those of us that have been around for a while have been hearing about the end of the billable hour for a couple of decades, and so it's been remarkably resilient. But when you're talking about if clients can buy a tool that's going to be 80% faster, it really does make you think about just for how long are they going to continue to pay an hourly model if they're not seeing value out of that model. There are alternative models and we're not just talking about fixed pricing, which can be troublesome. Sometimes it's just, capping a price and you're still doing all the same amount of work, but you're fixing a price. Uh, there are ways of coming up with alternative fee arrangements that still allow for you to have a profitable business. And we can be thinking about things like subscription models, thinking about how can you deliver one-to-many services where you're delivering value to people, but it's available without them always having to book one-on-one time with you. Final piece of it is just thinking about the way we work is changing, and we're increasingly going to be editing work that's been produced with the assistance of AI rather than starting a task by going and getting a file and looking for the relevant information. And so we just need to just again recalibrate, how do we set ourselves and our businesses up for success? What does supervision look like in that sort of a world? There's a lot of, how are youngsters going to learn if they don't sit there and read lots of documents? I'm not. I think there are better ways of training people than having them somewhat cope based on luck as to whether or not they get people who are generous with their time, or there are some people who have done well out of the old system, and there are some people who had some terrible experiences of being thrown in the deep end with complete inadequate supervision. So I think we just have to accept that we need to train people for different work now. The tasks and the skills that are required are going to be different. And we're all still getting our heads around what that's going to look like. But the idea that clients would pay for us to train people by having them practice on a whole lot of work just may not be sustainable going forward. So we just have to think that through. What I am seeing is working well when people are adopting AI tools is getting that across the board foundational knowledge of AI, but also supporting people with specific use cases for their practice area and their kind of work, where leaders are visibly talking about how they're using AI. They're carving time out in their meetings and saying, this is what I used AI for this week and it was good. This is what I used it for and it didn't work. Creating that expectation that these tools are to be used and to be tested. Not just rolling out these tools with a mandatory, you must use them this way, but really engaging with people about how to combine these tasks to incorporate them in processes to get the best output. It is a much more collaborative process. There is no sort of, when we used to get Microsoft Word, you pressed X and you got Y output. These tools don't work that way. They're different. It's a much more iterative process of working out how to incorporate them. And so you need to be prepared to invite feedback and testing and be prepared to change. And then looking for individual project progress on and setting some goals around AI adoption and tracking individuals on that. And again, you have to do that in a kind way and an inclusive way. But that's where we're seeing people are actually making progress. If you just say, well, we've given everyone access and they'll work it out, that hasn't really given optimal results in most cases. I also just want to reframe when you're looking at all of those tools, and I threw a whole lot of names at you, really helpful just to start with, instead of, oh, we must buy some AI because it's important, or so and so likes X tool and they're clever, so I'll buy X tool. Really just thinking about, what is the business problem we have here? It's taking me too long to turn around the work after I have the initial intake with clients, and I need some help to be able to get closer to a good output faster. Or and who is going to use it and how are they going to use it? And just really be clear about where you're looking for it to add value. And when you have that kind of as a bit of a guiding path, and you can be a bit flexible about how you get there, but you're quite clear about what you want to focus on first, because there are so many things you could use it for. But if you can just pick, it would be good if we could do X, which would enable us to improve the value to this kind of client, then you can just have a more focused search on a solution to that problem. And then you move on to the next problem. And if you do problem after problem, by the end of it, you'll have solved four problems rather than we set out to do everything at once. We didn't get very far with any of them. Do think about security, where data is hosted, what tools things integrate with, because when busy people are asked to have to swap platforms, that just causes a loss, less, a loss of efficiency, and it can hinder adoption. Ask for results. There are lots of really shiny demos, but if you're clear about what you're trying to achieve, what your requirements are, then that can help you to be asking the right questions, ask for proof that will help you get clear about whether or not this is going to help you achieve your strategic objective. And if you're still finding this confusing, ask for help again. There are people who can help start with whoever's doing your IT support or managed service provider, and just start educating yourself about what options exist. So we looked at those four mistakes. So assuming that AI is suitable for somebody else, but not for you, and I just encourage you to be a bit more curious. Don't assume that just giving access to AI will lead automatically to adoption. You do have to do a bit more work to enable your team to upskill. Don't assume that general AI tools will deliver the quality that you need for legal service provision. So I think you should explore what legal grade tools can do, and don't rule out the AI tools just on cost. Think about the overall value. And if you've been making any of these assumptions, I really encourage you to just have a rethink. There's a big opportunity here to redesign the way that we deliver legal services, and you can do it. And it's up it that is in the hands of each of us. It's not something we need to be waiting for somebody else to work out. You started working as a lawyer, you started your law firm because you wanted to serve your clients and to be a good human and have a business that fits your life, not the other way around. So even if you're not a tech geek, or maybe you're not in control of the budget of these things, but you can be part of the journey to really shake up the way that legal services are delivered. It's much easier to get started. Like I said, if you can use Outlook, you can use these AI tools. So don't stick with a rusty old bus where you're gripping the steering wheel and just waiting for everything to fall over. Take advantage of some of these tools to streamline and simplify the way that your business operates. So it runs smarter, you can communicate better, and you've got more time to do the work that only you can do. I'm always happy to talk about this. If you've got some specific questions, feel free. I would also, you can download a chapter of my book. And if you found this session valuable, I'd really love it if you could give me some feedback on what resonated or what was helpful. That's enormously helpful in me, just letting people know how I can help. And as I said, that's my mission, is to help lawyers understand how these tools can help. We've got a bit of time for questions. Well, actually, we're at time. So if you have to go, that's fine. But if you have questions, feel free to come off mute or put something in the chat.